And the technology isn't the platforms. The technology is the network. I mean, all computer geek people like me, I hasten to add, do understand that the network is the great invention of the 21st century, and that it can defeat the hierarchy, it can replace the hierarchy. But what is it within the network that's working? I mean, some of the things you can identify, and that should be really obvious as journalism students, as to journalists, is memes. So a meme is a better way of it's Richard Dawkins who invented the term. It's like an idea gene that replicates itself. Now, buy the theory or not, I don't know whether I buy the theory, I buy the description. That, for example, one of the protesters said to me in Britain, look, memes allow you to market test ideas really quickly. And the three things happen to them. Either they prevail, or they bubble under, or you quickly realise they're not going anywhere. And what the usefulness of this to the protesters is that they can just they can test out modes of action and then withdraw from them. I tried on them the idea of what if to talk to somebody in a Bulgarian squad, you'd have to pass a resolution at UCL occupation, and that had to go to the national NUS. And if it didn't pass, then you wouldn't go any further. But if it did, it would go to an international student body, and then they would send a fax down to the Bulgarian student body, and then they would send, and eventually somebody in Bulgaria would say, oh, the British students support us. Well, you laugh, but that is the way all protest movements, and we're including here the Paris Commune, the revolutions of 1848, the Bolshevik Revolution. As I wrote in the blog, men hung under the trestles of railway carriages to make the kind of international links I've just described without having to go through hierarchies. But now, it's there, you tweeted it. And they couldn't imagine that world. I think we in the mainstream media, many of my colleagues, have trouble with understanding the power of information in a world where it flows like that. And so, yeah, I think the answer to the question is that the mainstream media is starting to get the it of what it is, and the it is very simple. The ideas that even 3 years ago were probably contentious and not proven are the main way that young, urban, intellectually driven, people who study driven movements do work. And you only have to read the coming insurrection to find out what they are and how they work. However, it's only part of reality, and as you will know all too well, that's only a part of Egypt. It's only a part of America. It's only a part of Britain. We'll see on March the 26th when the TUC has its demo. I've just been interviewing Brendan Barber, and they're already working out ways to try and stop what Project Dual Power, as it's known by its proponents, which is to create mayhem and chaos on that day. They've got it well in hand. They're going to get some FBU members to try and dump things down. So it's only one part of reality, but when it is the reality, as it was with the student occupation, that's how, I think we have to try and work out, this is how it works. Don't go and met police star and say, right, who's in charge here? I mean, that is the stupidest question for a mainstream media person to say.
Thank you. I promise I will throw it open for questions in a moment, but I want to abuse my privilege to ask a couple of follow-ups. Jacky, you said some really interesting stuff about how you felt it was the right moment, as it were, that Aljazeera had expanded and was treating foreign really seriously, which is kind of interesting. I never thought of it in those ways, that it parallels my own experience before I joined Amnesty and before that, was at the Independent when it started, and actually it hit randomly, I think. It was very lucky. It started in 1986 with a huge foreign staff at a time when people were cutting back, and it just hit a moment, although actually that moment hadn't begun when it launched, of both perestroika and glasnost and the revolutions and the Gulf War, and it gained a considerable reputation off the back of the fact that foreign was on the front pages. So it sounds as though you're saying, in a sense, Al Jazeera has hit lucky in the same way that all of us are interested in international news. I'm interested first if that is right from your point of view, but what in addition to that, because after all the BBC, for example, had fantastic, vast amounts of coverage, and elsewhere in the world this was also a huge TV story, and all the big TV stations. What was it that made your, the last figure I saw, but several days old, was 2,500%. I'm sure it's like 5,000 or 6,000% up in the meantime. What is the kind of added value, as it were, and what are the lessons of that?
Well, I mean, it's slightly arguable whether, one theory I've heard is that Egypt 2011 was for Al Jazeera what the first Gulf War was for CNN. It was that moment. I mean, it's slightly arguable in that there was a greater awareness of Al Jazeera following the Gaza war of 2 years ago. But I think Gaza, you know, it's still of limited interest compared to the huge resonance of the events in Egypt. You know, it really, and the fact that Al Jazeera had invested, Al Jazeera was concentrating on developing world and particularly the Arab world. I think one of the reasons why it resonated with that larger audience is something that I can't claim credit for at all, because, you know, I'm a Western trained, you know, I grew up in the BBC with Paul. The fact that there were so many authentic voices on the ground, the fact that there were, you know, British Egyptians, American Egyptians, and that's certainly what some of the younger people spoke to me about. I mean, I met some younger people in Egypt, and they're like, you know, hey, you know, who's that dude on the balcony? You know, he seems to kind of understand, you know, Egypt, but he speaks really good English. And I think that was one of the strengths, and I can't claim credit for that at all, because I'm sort of, you know, from establishment mainstream media. But I think that was one of the things that certainly kind of hooked some of the younger people. Do you want to talk about the problem with Al Jazeera becoming, you know, because I mean, I'm old school journalism, and I believe as a journalist, you want to cover the story. If you become part of the story, you know, you've failed in your task. And the problem with what happened in Egypt is that we were made part of the story by the Egyptian authorities. Al Jazeera was banned at an early stage. Al Jazeera was accused of being an instigator or an inciter of violence on the side of the authorities. On the side of the protesters, there was a suspicion, or there was a rumour flying around that Al Jazeera was involved in some kind of conspiracy with the US and Israel to keep Mubarak in power. So we actually became part of the story, and you'd be out covering the protest, and you'd be hearing the chants, and one of the chants would be, "Where is Al Jazeera now?" And when I first heard it, I said to the protesters around me in Arabic, I said, you know, we're here, we're present, I said, you know, mawjouda. And they said, where? And I said, huna, here. And my fixer's like, shut up, Jacky. You've got this crowd, you know, baying for your blood. But it became very difficult to actually cover the story, because, you know, I want to cover the story, and it's like, where are you from? And we were trying to fudge where we were from. We said we were from Paris. We were from Paris, but you know, you want to be able to cover the story without being kind of you want to be apart from the story, not a part of the story. And it becomes difficult when people are trying to suck you into the story and they're trying to turn you into a player, whereas what you're just trying to do is you're trying to cover it from the outside.